If this is happening to you, you're not going crazy, you're waking up. Suddenly, the things you used to care about don't feel important anymore. Conversations that once energized you now drain you. You're no longer emotionally invested in drama, achievement, or being understood. It's not depression, it's not detachment. It's something far deeper and much more powerful. You've begun to feel like the observer of your life rather than the main character. And while that sensation may seem disorienting, even lonely at times, it's actually the first sign that your quantum consciousness is activating. It starts subtly. Maybe you're walking through your day and feel a strange sense of separation, as if you're watching yourself in a dream. You hear your thoughts, but they no longer sound like truth. They sound like programming. You feel emotions rise, but instead of being swept away, you watch them pass like weather. You realize your identity, your name, your history, your roles, are not you, but garments you've worn out of habit. And for the first time, you feel a pull to remove them. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's not escapism, it's a shift in frequency. The beginning of a radical inner recalibration that happens when your awareness outgrows the cage of conditioning. Your consciousness, the real you, starts to detach from form, and in that detachment, something ancient and intuitive begins to stir. You don't feel like the same person anymore because you're not. You're experiencing what mystics have called awakening, and what quantum physicist Amit Goswami calls the moment when you realize that consciousness is not in the body is in consciousness. In that realization, reality begins to bend. You question things you once accepted without thought. You wonder whether your choices have ever really been yours. You begin to feel as though you're navigating two worlds, the one you've been conditioned to believe is real, and the one you're now starting to sense, a world built not from matter, but from mind. You might experience moments of intense synchronicity, moments where thoughts manifest faster than usual, or where time feels off. These are not accidents. They're signals that your field is becoming more sensitive and more active. But here's where it gets confusing. Nothing outside you may look different yet. Your job is the same. Your relationships, your environment, your routines, they haven't shifted, and yet you have. And because the external world still reflects the old frequency, you might begin to doubt what you're feeling inside. This is the threshold, the void, the in-between, where your old self is fading, but your new consciousness hasn't fully anchored. It's tempting to turn back, to reattach, to pretend you didn't see through the illusion, but you can't. Because once you start waking up, you can't unsee, you can't unknow. The veil doesn't reseal. This phase, where nothing makes sense but everything feels aligned, is sacred. It's where your quantum consciousness begins its emergence, not through books or teachings, but through direct experience, through the undoing of who you thought you were, through the discomfort of not knowing what comes next and the deeper peace of no longer needing to. You're beginning to realize that your mind is not here to survive reality. It's here to shape it. And that knowing changes everything. What if everything you've been taught about reality is backwards? Since childhood, you've been conditioned to believe that the world out there, solid, material, objective, is the source of your experience. That consciousness is just a byproduct of brain activity. That mind comes after matter. But what if that's not true? What if it's never been true? According to the traditional scientific model, the universe began with particles, energy, space, time, and somewhere along the way, consciousness mysteriously emerged. But this model hits a wall when it tries to explain observation, creativity, intuition, or the very act of choosing. It cannot account for the inner life, the part of you that feels, witnesses, and intends. And this is exactly where quantum physics begins to crack open the illusion. In the quantum world, nothing is fixed until it is observed. Particles don't exist as things, they exist as probabilities, as waves of potential. It's not until a conscious observer steps in that the wave collapses into a particle, into matter, into reality. This is not metaphysics, it's physics. and it breaks the materialist paradigm at its root. This is where thinkers like Amit Goswami go further. He doesn't just say consciousness affects reality. He says consciousness is primary, that everything begins in awareness. The material world is not the cause of your mind. Your mind is the field from which the material world arises. You are not inside a body moving through space. Your body, your brain, your entire timeline is inside you, inside your field of consciousness. Let that land. This means you are not a thing observing other things. You are the field observing itself. You are the canvas and the painter, the dreamer and the dream. And when this shift happens, when you realize your consciousness is not confined to neurons or a skull, something profound begins to unfold. The rules of cause and effect soften, time stretches, synchronicity increases, and you begin to sense that life is not happening to you, but through you. This changes how you approach everything. Decisions no longer feel like linear logic. They feel like resonance, like alignment. You don't just think anymore, you perceive. You feel into possibilities. And in doing so, you begin to collapse timelines, not reactively but intentionally. You become the observer that chooses, and that choice shapes the field. But here's the paradox. The more awake you become, the less your mind can grasp what's happening. Because quantum consciousness isn't something the mind understands. It's something the self experiences. It's not a theory. It's a state, a frequency, a return to the original position of being, not behind your eyes but behind existence itself. This is the awakening, and it's why, as your quantum consciousness activates, the world may look the same, but feel profoundly different. You see people acting out old programs, but you're no longer inside the script. You hear conversations filled with fear and ego, but your nervous system doesn't take the bait. You're unplugging, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. You're remembering that you are not the result of creation. You are the creator becoming aware of itself. This awareness isn't elitist or rare. It's natural. It's your birthright. But in a world built on distraction, it's also revolutionary. Because once you reclaim it, once you live from it, you no longer play the game of seeking. You realize you were never incomplete, never broken, only unaware of your own infinite role in the quantum dance of creation. There comes a moment in every awakening where the scaffolding of your identity starts to collapse. Not because you're broken, but because the version of you that was built to survive is no longer needed. It's confusing, painful, even terrifying at times, because the structures you once clung to, your name, your roles, your beliefs, start to feel hollow, artificial. And for the first time, you see that much of what you called you was never really you. This is not the end. This is the unraveling. And it's essential, because you can't awaken quantum consciousness while clinging to a mechanical identity. The two vibrate at incompatible frequencies. One is rigid, reactive, built from programming and survival. The other is fluid, expansive, attuned to presence and infinite choice. To enter one, the other must dissolve. At first, the ego doesn't like this. It panics, it fights, it whispers old stories. You're losing control. You don't know who you are anymore. Something's wrong with you. But nothing is wrong. What's happening is that your awareness, your true self, is stepping out from behind the mask. And the mask knows its time is limited. The ego is not evil. It's just outdated. It was designed to protect you in a world that told you who to be. It gathered data from your parents, culture, religion, trauma, and built an identity that could navigate that map. But as your consciousness expands, the map no longer matches the terrain. You see through the rules, the conditioning, the manipulations, and you begin to question not just your thoughts, but the thinker itself. This is the dissolution of the programmed self, and it's sacred. You start noticing thought patterns that no longer resonate, beliefs you never chose, reactions that feel foreign. It's like walking through a house you've lived in for years and suddenly realizing none of the furniture is yours. This is why awakening often feels like grief. Not because you're dying, but because the illusion is. The persona you thought was essential is fading, and in its place, space is opening. Vast, quiet space. And in that space, something deeper begins to emerge. You become the observer of your body. You feel emotions without being consumed by them. You hear thoughts without being ruled by them. You stop identifying with the voice in your head and start watching it, curiously, like a character in a film. And the more you observe, the more you realize, I am not this voice. I am the awareness that hears it. This is what mystics have pointed to for centuries. What quantum pioneers like Amit Goswami now echo, that you are not a bundle of thoughts and flesh. You are consciousness itself, localizing in this moment, through this body, but not limited to it. And the more you live from this awareness, the less the old self can hold on. It begins to lose power, not because you fight it, but because you no longer believe it. This shift isn't always dramatic. Often, it's subtle. You wake up and realize you don't want to argue anymore. That chasing approval feels pointless. That control is an illusion. That peace matters more than being right. And in that stillness, the quantum self, the version of you that is not defined by memory or biology, begins to rise. This self doesn't need a narrative. It doesn't fear the unknown. It's not seeking an outcome. It simply is. Pure presence, pure perception, pure power. And as this self becomes your new default, reality itself begins to bend. Because the field doesn't respond to the ego. It responds to the self behind the ego, the one who chooses from coherence, not chaos. So if you felt lost lately, if you're questioning who you really are, if everything feels like it's falling apart, you're not breaking down. You're waking up. The program is dissolving. The illusion is fading. And what remains is who you've always been. The conscious creator, finally remembering itself. There is a sacred moment in every awakening when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what am I creating now? Up until now, you may have felt like life was something to survive or manage. Something happening around you, and sometimes to you, but rarely through you. You may have thought your job was to observe, to stay mindful, to not react. And yes, that's the beginning. The necessary space between the old self and the true self. But awakening doesn't end with observation. At some point, you must take the seat of the creator, not with control, not with force, but with coherent, conscious presence. Because in the quantum field, observation collapses the wave function. And the way you observe, the energy behind it, determines what collapses into form. If you observe through fear, you summon what matches it. If you observe through clarity, you stabilize peace. Every choice you make, every emotion you hold, every story you believe, and they are signals, instructions, activations, and the field listens, not to what you say, but to what you are. This is where you stop reacting to circumstances and start generating realities. Not all at once, not in perfect control, but in consistent alignment. You begin to realize that your frequency is not a side effect. It's your contribution. You are no longer just reading the field, you are writing it. And the field responds in kind. You notice synchronicities, not random, but rhythmic. The right words at the right time. The person who calls just when you were thinking of them. Ideas that seem to come from nowhere. Time stretching or collapsing in strange ways. Life begins to move with you because you've stopped resisting it. You're no longer trying to bend reality into your preferences. You've become available to something deeper, to the version of reality that already matches who you truly are. And it's in this space that the real quantum shift happens. When you realize that the external world is not something to chase, it's something to mirror. That the field reflects not your intentions but your identity. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are coherent with. So who are you being? In this moment, not yesterday, not after your next healing session, not when you finally figure everything out. Right now, what are you vibrating as? Are you still living as the memory of your past, or as the signal of your future? Because you cannot collapse a new timeline from an old state of being. You can't generate abundance from lack, clarity from confusion, love from fear. The field doesn't respond to effort. It responds to frequency. And the moment you align your inner world with your chosen reality, without evidence, without certainty, without needing validation, the shift begins. And that's the moment you realize the observer was always the creator. Now, if this speaks to where you are, if you're no longer just watching your life but ready to shape it, let it echo in the field by commenting, "I'm not just a mind, I am the field." Because when you declare who you are from a place of knowing, the universe doesn't just hear it, it reorganizes itself around it. What does it actually look like to live from quantum consciousness? Not just during meditation, not just when you're feeling aligned or inspired, but in the messy, ordinary, sometimes overwhelming moments of everyday life. This is the ultimate integration, when the insights you've received become your automatic state of being. When your identity is no longer a mask you remember to wear, but a frequency you naturally embody. You begin to notice that your reactions have slowed down, not because you're forcing calm, but because the trigger simply doesn't land anymore. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you breathe. An old wound gets touched, and you observe, not collapse. You don't suppress emotion. You just stop being run by it, because you're no longer reacting from the self that was programmed to survive. You're responding from the self that remembers, I am not the moment. I am the field witnessing the moment. And this shift begins to affect everything. Conversations deepen because you're no longer speaking to defend or impress. You're listening through presence. Relationships evolve because you stop expecting others to fill a void you've already met within yourself. Even your work starts to transform. Tasks that used to feel heavy now flow with new clarity because you're moving from alignment, not obligation. You stop pushing. You start pulling. You stop proving. You start radiating. From the outside, it might look like you're doing the same things, but inside, everything has changed. Because your point of reference is no longer external, it's vibrational, it's internal, it's the self, stabilized in awareness. And with that stability, your choices become more refined. You stop asking, is this the right decision? And start asking, is this the right frequency? You feel into timelines, not just outcomes. You trust the pull of intuition over the logic of fear. And in doing so, you collapse new versions of reality, not by effort, but by coherence. This is what it means to live as your quantum self, not floating above life, but moving through it with grounded sovereignty, not bypassing pain, but witnessing it from a deeper center, not needing control, but trusting calibration. And yes, you'll still face challenges. Yes, you'll still meet resistance, but you'll relate to those moments differently. You'll remember, this too is part of the field, and in remembering you reclaim your power, because nothing that shows up in your experience is random. It's all feedback, a reflection of your signal. And if you don't like the reflection, you don't fight the mirror. You adjust the source. This is the radical responsibility of quantum living, knowing that while you can't control everything, you are the point of origin, not of every event, but of your frequency in the face of it. And that frequency, steady, clean, aligned, becomes your portal. Amit Goswami often says, you choose your reality through how you collapse possibilities. And every moment is a new choice, a new observation, a new vibration. The question is no longer, will life align with me? But will I align with what I already know I am? Because the truth is, quantum consciousness isn't something you visit. It's something you stabilize. By now you may be feeling it, not just intellectually but viscerally, that quiet sense of return, not to the past, not to an identity, but to something deeper, something original, A recognition that you've always been more than your name, your story, or your circumstances. That what you call awakening isn't a new state. It's the uncovering of what was always there. But here's the truth no one tells you. Awakening is only the beginning. The real journey is stabilization, and that's where most people fall off. Not because they're weak or undisciplined, but because the world around them hasn't shifted yet. You return to your environment, your relationships, your patterns, and if you're not anchored in the new frequency, the old one quietly pulls you back in. This is why the space between awakening and embodiment is so fragile and so sacred. It's where your quantum consciousness must become your operating system, not just your insight. Where you no longer visit presence during moments of peace but live from it even in the chaos. Where your nervous system isn't waiting for external safety to regulate, because it is the safety, the signal, the new center of gravity. And this is also where you realize that embodiment isn't about perfection. It's about return, again and again, realignment, reattunement. Not from guilt or fear, but from love, from deep knowing, from the part of you that no longer wants to escape life, but to experience it fully, from the highest vibration you can hold. To support that, I've created something very intentional. It's not a course, not a lecture, not another collection of ideas. It's a map, a guide for this exact moment in your journey. In the pinned comment below, you'll find a link to my ebook, Awaken Your Quantum Power. Inside, you'll discover the 7 energetic principles that allow you to live from your quantum self. Not occasionally, but consistently. It will show you how to stabilize your frequency, even when external reality hasn't caught up. How to shift your nervous system out of survival and into creation. How to stop chasing your future and start collapsing it into the now. You'll learn practices that blend neuroscience, quantum physics, and spiritual coherence, all designed to help you integrate this state, not as a peak experience, but as a new normal. Because you didn't come here to temporarily awaken. You came here to become the signal, to live from the field, to remember who you are, and then embody it without compromise. So if you've resonated with what you've felt here today, don't let it fade as the next video plays. Anchor it, ground it, deepen it. The field isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's waiting for you to be present and fully, unapologetically, and consciously. Your quantum consciousness isn't a concept, it's your next reality. And now, it's time to live from it.